Special episode of Outdrank the Coverage, the live draft show, is brought to you by the Frisco Bar and Grill. They're located at 6750 Gaylord Parkway, Suite 120 in Frisco. You can find them online at thefriscobar.com. I'm telling you, folks, if you're a sports fan, a karaoke fan, or a fan of live music and trivia, this is the place you want to be. They not only have great food, great drinks, they have great prices, and they have a great atmosphere. I'm telling you, this is where old friends meet and new friends are found. I promise you, you will love the Frisco Bar and Grill. Intern Noe and I will be talking about it during the draft show, but we love their appetizers. We love their wings. I love their sliders. My girlfriend loves the karaoke. Hey, if you're a fan of Oklahoma Sooners or San Francisco 49ers, the Frisco Bar and Grill is the official watch party place for both of those. And intern Noe and I was there for a Monday night game last year when San Francisco was playing, and the atmosphere is absolutely amazing. You cannot beat it. So check out the Frisco Bar and Grill, located at 6750 Gaylord Parkway, Suite 120 in Frisco, where old friends meet and new friends are found. Is your demanding work lifestyle in need of fire-resistant clothing that can keep up? Well, L4FR clothing should be your go-to for quality, affordability, safety, and style. L4FR was founded by a third-generation oil field worker who is also a veteran. Thus, this company has a deep appreciation for reliability and longevity, all while we provide first-rate customer service. Our durable apparel will serve you well for many years to come, whether you're working on a pipeline, a lineman climbing utility poles, or in any other environment requiring fire-resistant apparel. L4FR has you covered. Our apparel is tough enough to resist hazardous conditions while still providing high comfort and style. L4FR provides clothing options to ensure your safety and comfort, whether you're on the job or not. To view our complete inventory of flame-resistant garments, please visit our online store at l4frclothing.com or give us a call at 817-757-4935. Si habla español. L4 Media, we talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out. Last time we looked at the 71 Cowboys. This time, Outdrank the Coverage takes a look back at the 1977 Dallas Cowboys, the second Super Bowl winner. Hello, everybody. I'm Terry Bennett. That's Intern Noe. Before we begin, Intern Noe, how are you doing? And what are you drinking?
Mr. Bennett, I'm doing fantastic. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great.
Today I'm drinking, it's a cocktail. It's 1792. It's a small batch bourbon, and I'm mixing it with Dr. Pepper cherry Coke because, I'm from Texas.
Oh, you doing cherry Dr. Pepper and Coke?
Well, I'm from Texas, so I call every soda Coke.
Yeah, we call everything Coke, which is weird. You think we would call everything Dr. Pepper?
You would?
Yeah. But yeah, we do. We call everything Coke.
So Dr. Pepper cherry.
Yep.
And 1792 small batch as a cocktail.
I am just drinking straight vodka, but I am chasing it with a Coke, an actual Coke, in my 19. I figured this one out. I forgot to tell you this. This is from 1989.
Oh, wow.
Arkansas still in the league, and I researched when TCU changed it. Anyway, if you don't know, I'm drinking it from an old Southwest Conference glass. But now that we've got that out of the way, by the way, we played the L4FR clothing because, here we go.
Cheers.
Virtual Wadoosh, because they provided the food and the drinks for us today. We do appreciate that. So we're here to talk to 77 Cowboys. Now, if you listen to the 71 or watch the 71 on YouTube at L4 Media Company, we play video and we just kind of talk about how the 77 Cowboys won the Super Bowl. Yeah. Now, of all the winners of the Super Bowl for Dallas, all five of them, this is probably the most boring because it might be the most dominant.
Yeah, it was the most dominant. They had
93 is close.
93 is close. They themselves made it difficult with the Emmitt Smith holdout.
Yes,
the first
at the beginning of the
weeks.
year. Yeah, 2 weeks in, and then the 2 weeks he was out.
They really only lost one game when he started, but in that one game they lost. I'm sorry, they lost one game when he started. That one game he lost, he got injured early
against Atlanta.
Yeah,
and then so the funny thing is, I realize this now. 93 and 77 have two things in common. All four of Dallas's losses in 93 were back to back. The two losses in 77 are back to back. Dallas at one point in 77 was basically playing to be perfect, and they went, I think, 7-0 or 8-0, and then they lose back to back games. We'll get into all of that, but yeah. So last time we played a lot of clips from the America's game because there was Dwayne Thomas and Bob Lilly and Roger Staubach. I went back and was watching America's game for 77, and to be honest with you, it's kind of boring. Yeah. There's not a lot. I mean, Dallas legitimately just kind of rolled through the season, and they were helped in the AFC by Denver. I think Denver would, if you were to pick one team in the playoffs in 77 that Dallas matched up best with, it was against Denver, against a former Cowboy quarterback. We'll get into all that. So I just feel like everything fell perfect for the 77 season. Not taking anything away from them. I'm just saying, that sometimes that happens.
I mean, it was a culmination of what happened after the 71 season and everything that led up into the 77 season. And we'll get into that as well. I mean, there's a combination of great drafting. The World Football League kind of affected it, kind of ended one dynasty. It was just, a lot of things that happened in between that kind of set up that team. And then the other teams, the other powers of the NFC started to age a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas Dallas, because of these great draft picks, they were kind of youthful. They were a complete departure from the 71 team. But looking back, if you look at the starting lineups, especially on defense for comparing the 71 versus the 77 team, it's hard for me to pick out which one's better.
Yeah. I'll say this, and by the way, so what we're going to do in this weekend's episodes, again, if you don't know, we record these once a month in the off season. We basically record 2 or 3 shows in a row. The next one's going to be the 78 through 85 years for Dallas. I think if you would have talked to my dad, and I reference my dad, but that's who got me in football and who was watching the Cowboys then. I think he would have said after this 77 season, Dallas is going to win 2-3 more Super Bowls.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that going forward in the next show, the 78 to 85 years. But they didn't. And we can talk about why and all that. But I think the 71 Cowboys was the end of an era, with it being Bob Lilly and, of course, Lance Allworth and Mike Ditka and a couple other players like that. I think there's 5 players from the 71 team that was in the 77 team and on. Charlie Waters, Cliff Harris being 2. They were like rookies or second-year guys in 71.
Well, I mean, Charlie Waters I don't even think he was starting. I think he was a cornerback.
Yeah, he was the cornerback. That was the whole thing. He started as a cornerback. He was terrible. Landry moved him to safety, but I think that was 73 when they really started that.
Okay.
But yeah, so it was just crazy because after that 77 Super Bowl, you think this is a team, and how many times we talk about like the 85 Bears. It still amazes me to this day that the 85 Bears only won 1 Super Bowl, because that team was so dominant defensively for 2 years before and 3 years after. You look at other teams, of course, Buffalo at least was making it to the Super Bowl, but they could never quite win it, but they kept going back and back. But the NFC, from about 78 on, the NFC actually got to be tougher, because you and I make the joke that for the 70s, it was basically Dallas, Minnesota, and the Rams. The Rams just could not get out of that second round. They kept getting beat in the second round until finally in 79, they upset Dallas, the Jack Youngblood broken leg game. We'll talk about that in the next episode. And they finally made the Super Bowl. And as you said, that might have been their worst team of the 5-year run that they had. And so it's just crazy. The NFC, you see why the AFC dominated so much outside of Dallas winning the 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the AFC also had a lot of good competition. The few years the Bengals were pretty good, as you can see. You know what? Honestly, 77 was the first season the Broncos made the playoffs.
Yeah, they were a Cinderella story by far.
But before that, they were having winning records. This is the first year under Red Miller, 50-year-old rookie head coach. They went 12-2 in 77. But before that, the prior coach, they had winning seasons. They're one of those teams that started in 1960, just like with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
They didn't have a winning record. So in 62, they were 7-7, but it took them until about 73 to actually have a winning record. And they were somewhat competitive from about 73 to 76. new coaching change, new defensive philosophy, new quarterback, kind of took them from a 9-5 team to a 12-2 team. And really that last game, and we'll talk about this later, but the last game in 77 was actually Denver and Dallas in the regular season finale. Just so happened to be the finale. Denver went in that game 12-1.
Yep.
They didn't really need to win the game, but it was a low scoring 14-6 game, I believe.
Yeah.
So I mean, the AFC was pretty strong. Honestly, I really think the World Football League, which started in 74, ended in 75, kind of killed the Miami dynasty.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing, but you're real big on that. Well, I mean, you think about it, all three of them did. Zonka, Kick, and Mercury Morris all ended up in the World Football League.
And Par Wohlfield, too.
It's really odd that Dallas, because we saw that in the 71 season, and it's infamous about how Tex Schramm underpaid, and it was brilliant. Underpay your stars, and then tell everybody else, we can't pay you more than we pay Roger. We can't pay you more than we pay at the time Bob Lilly. You would have thought multiple Dallas Cowboys would have went to the World Football League, but that, like him, we can talk about what he was too robotic or what, but that was the allure of Landry. Landry kept players there, even underpaid. Even as they cussed him and hated him, there was something about him that just players just could not give it up. But let's go ahead and back up. So we talked Dallas. They won the 71 Super Bowl. And then they went on a stretch where they were playing in the NFC title game 3 straight years. They lose to Minnesota. They lose to Washington, which is funny because you literally almost had a Dallas Buffalo situation in the 70s. And I don't think the Dolphins matched up well with the Cowboys. I think that the Dolphins would have been the sorry losers if they'd have played Dallas 3 times. They just didn't match up well with them. Yeah. Everything that Dallas did well, like the run defense at that time, that's what, I mean, look, I know Bob Greasy's a Hall of Famer, and that's fine. But let's be honest, that offense was led by the likes of Zonka and Kick and Mercury Morris.
Yeah, and Dallas' run defense would stop that, whereas Minnesota and Washington just really couldn't stop it, especially Minnesota in the 73 season. So in 72, Dwayne Thomas' situation was just getting worse.
Yeah.
And then they had to trade him, so there was no more Dwayne Thomas for the Cowboys.
Which eventually leads to Tony Dorsett, because the one weakness between 1971 and 1977 for the Cowboys, they ran the ball well, but they didn't have that home run back. That's what Dwayne Thomas had been in 70 and 71. And they tried to, you had Calvin Hill retiring, Walt Garrison retiring, Dan Reeves. Dan Reeves was already on his last legs in 71.
He was a player coach.
Yeah, he really didn't. Yeah. I mean, he played, but he didn't really play a ton. But by 77, they're all gone. That leads to, and we'll back up, but I'm just saying that leads to Tony Dorsett, which leads to a completely new era of the Dallas Cowboys. But it's funny because in 1974, Cowboys missed the playoffs. They go 8-6, so it's a winning season, but they missed the playoff. But that draft,
I mean, think about though 74. There's a lot of people that left after that season, mainly because they were getting older. Some of those guys just left to other teams. But we can go through the list. I mean, the ones that retired were Bob Lilly, Mr. Cowboy, the first pick, Walt Garrison, the fullback, Cornell Green, strong safety,
and Dave Manders, underrated center.
Yeah, so at this point, Manders was toward the end of his career, and John Fitzgerald became the starter, I think, the prior season.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he was a legendary Cowboy, played a long time for the Cowboys. Those are the ones that retired, and then just their final season after 74 for the Cowboys, Bob Hayes, he was already on his last legs, went to the 49ers. Calvin Hill went to the World Football League.
He's the only one of note that went to the World Football League.
Pat Toomey, he went to the Bills, the defensive end. John Nealon, he went to the Eagles. And then Craig Morton, he had 2 or 3 bad years with the Giants.
And he'll come back up here in a little bit.
He will, definitely.
But let's see what Dallas did add. And let's go back up to, everybody thinks that like the best draft was that 74 draft. Everybody talks about that. That's the Dirty Dozen, or it's technically the 75 draft. And it is. It's a great draft. You got Randy White, you got Hollywood Henderson, Bob Brewing, Pat Donovan. All of them became starters and all of them became impact players. But in that 74 draft, which is the 73 season 74 draft, you got Too Tall Jones and Danny White. And in that 73 draft, you got Billy Joe Dupree, very underrated tight end, who was still playing into the 80s for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Golden Richards, Harvey Martin, Drew Pearson. Now, Harvey Martin's a Hall of Fame player.
Think about the tight end luck the Cowboys have had. From the 70s, you had Billy Joe Dupree. 80s, you had Doug Cosby. 90s, you had Novacek.
Well, and you also have what's his name? Oh, Butch Johnson. Yeah, Butch Johnson too.
Yeah, Butch Johnson. Technically a receiver.
Well, I mean, but he was a tight end. He was that first hybrid guy. He's kind of what Charlie Joyner would be for the Chargers. And then, you know, he's a tight end, but he could split out, and he didn't really block that well.
We will talk about Butch Johnson a lot. We'll talk about the 77 Super Bowl.
Yes.
Just him.
Yes. The catch at the time, which would no way be a catch. Yeah. But that Dirty Dozen draft was great, but they were already world building, so to speak, with that 73 draft, 74 draft.
Tell us why the 75 draft is called the 30 Dozen draft.
Because there was literally 12 guys that ended up basically starting, led by, as we said, Randy White, Thomas Hollywood Henderson, Bob Brewing, another very underrated player.
So there was an undrafted player for the Cowboys that ended up getting a lot of time, but not for the Cowboys. With the Seahawks, Jim Zorn. Yeah, so he was a UFA player in 75, and then the next season, 76, there was 2 expansion teams to bring the league to 28 in total. One was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then the other was the Seattle Seahawks.
All right, so here's that draft. This is just, I mean, you want to talk about, and a lot of these guys probably didn't really, you at the moment, you really didn't think about it, but your first draft is Randy White. Your second round and first round pick, they had 2 first round picks, was Thomas Hollywood Henderson. And here's a crazy thing. Going back and watching something on Hollywood Henderson, he only had like 82 career games. He did not play as much as, we'll talk about him. Burton Lawless, who was all rookie in 75, was on the Super Bowl team, a very solid offensive guard. He didn't make a lot of noise, but he did right. Bob Brewing, again, 3-time Pro Bowl selection. Yeah. Pat Donovan, offensive tackle. He never missed a game in his 9 seasons with the Cowboys. On the Pro Bowl 4-time. Randy Hughes, very underrated secondary guy, played 6 seasons with Dallas, was Super Bowl champion. Kyle Davis, he didn't make the team. Mike Heckman, he's a guy that played 12 years for the Cowboys, and he was, he wasn't spectacular, and a lot of times he kind of got knocked because he wasn't spectacular, but he was just a very consistent off tackle linebacker that just made the plays.
He played 12 seasons for a reason.
Exactly. Herbert Scott, who played 10 years for the Cowboys, 3-time Pro Bowler, drafted in the 13th round. Again, this is way back when they went, 20 rounds or whatever. In the 14th round, Scott Laidlaw, a running back, played 6 years. So again, that Percy Howard drafted, was a UFA. He wasn't great, but he was a freak of nature. He had a big catch in the 76 Super Bowl for a touchdown. And then, as you talked about, Jim Zorn, who was eventually cut to make room for actually running back Preston Pearson, because Preston Pearson had been cut by the Steelers, and the Cowboys picked him up.
Yeah, you forget, Preston Pearson was a big factor in the Cowboys in late 70s, early 80s, but you forget that he was a Steeler before, won a couple of Super Bowls with the Steelers.
Well, and Preston Pearson legitimately was basically the first 3rd down back. We talked about that in the 71 season. Yeah. Once Dwayne Thomas kind of took over the starting role in 70 and 71, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up. Tony Dorsett in 77. I don't know what it says. Once he took over the starting spot, they basically started using Preston Pearson as a 3rd down back. And that's just something you didn't do back then. And again, we talk about where Landry is on the coaching icon, and I think somehow he gets underrated a lot of times. I don't think people today realize all that Landry created that we still use in schemes and defenses and offenses and all that fun stuff. But so you had this Dallas Cowboy team in 1976, or 75 season. They bounced back from that 86 or that 8-6 year, and they still only get a wild card, but they become the first team to make the wild card, make the Super Bowl as a wild card. And they play in what at that time maybe was the best Super Bowl, losing to Pittsburgh 21-17. That became the theme for the 70s. Pittsburgh beat Dallas in the 2 Super Bowls they played, and that's why Pittsburgh is named the team of the 70s, and rightfully so. They deserve that. Yeah. But I do think that I think you got to remember that basically from 1971 to 1979, Dallas was in 5 Super Bowls and they were also in 3 more NFC title games. Think about that. If they just win those games, we're talking about 8 to 9 years of Dallas in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and a lot of those times it was injuries or just one awfully bad game where Staubach would throw 3 interceptions, fumble a couple of times. It was just an isolated, awful game, and that's kind of what.
Well, and
the thing about like 76, it could have been the Cowboys and Raiders finally.
Mm-hmm. That's one of those that should have been.
Well, 77 should have been too, and we'll talk about that because the Raiders played in the AFC title game in 77, but they lost to the Orange Crush defense. It was kind of barely hanging on in that game. It wasn't. And the Raiders had given them the Broncos their only loss of the season, or up until the Cowboy game in the regular season finale. And the Raiders knew how to play against that Orange Crush defense. It just wasn't enough in that 76 title or 77 title game.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move over to the 77 season. Dallas came in as prohibitive favorites in the NFC. I mean, there was no doubt. This Dallas team, for all the talk, like we talk about 71 and next year's champions and stuff, this team was just absolutely at the apex. And then you add in a rookie in Tony Dorsett. And again, as we talked about earlier, that's what Dallas was missing, that home run threat. And it's not like, the funny part is it's not like if there's one story from that season, it's that he couldn't break into the starting lineup until like game 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Partly because Tom Landry just didn't trust rookies. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. That's where it really came. But Preston Pearson was really, really solid. When you look at their stats on the year, they ran for 2,500 yards, 21 touchdowns. They averaged 4.2 yards. You had Dorsett with 1,000 yards. But you had Preston Pearson only 300 yards rushing, but 535 yards reception. That's where I say he was really legitimately that first third down back. The guy you put in, that's all he did was third down. But nobody ever talks about Robert Newhouse. 700 yards rushing from a traditional fullback spot.
Wow.
And the late, great Robert Newhouse from Hallsville, Texas, from East Texas. He was a Hallsville Bobcat. Everybody talks about Earl Campbell's thighs, and those were big. Go look at the video of Robert Newhouse. That dude was a tree trunk, and he was, and we'll talk about him in the Super Bowl because he also throws for a touchdown pass. But when you look at this team, this team didn't have any weaknesses.
They really did. They really didn't need to throw that much either.
No.
They threw for about 2,600 yards.
Which was a lot, though, back then.
And they ran for almost 2,400 yards. So it was a very balanced offense. They could beat you anyway. And that was just the beauty of this offense. And it came in at a time where the powers of the NFC were starting to age. Yeah, AKA the Rams and the Vikings.
The Redskins had already started to age out.
Yeah.
They were a year away from where you'd start seeing Joe Theismann start to play well, and right. That and iteration, that iteration of the Redskins that would form into the early '80s with Joe Gibbs.
So this is that transition period that we talk about a lot in our podcast, where it's prime pickings for whoever wants to take advantage of this. And right now in 77, it was going to be the Cowboys. Yeah. The difference between 71 and 77, they have some stalwarts from that 71 team in Staubach, but they have a lot of youth infused. And that was because of the 73 to 76 well-executed drafting.
Yep.
And in this season, they did a couple of smart things where they converted Randy White from a linebacker to the defensive tackle.
Well, okay, so Randy White was a defensive tackle in college at Maryland. I don't know, whatever reason, Landry decided he thought he would be the next great middle linebacker. And Randy White struggled in space. So he converted him back down to a defensive tackle. But then he basically, in that flex defense, he kind of was a linebacker, because what the flex did, and if you're young, you don't know, the flex was basically, it was a 4-3, but you took your 2 tackles, or you took a tackle in the end, depending on the play, and you basically offset them off the line by a yard. And what it allowed them to do was basically get into the gap without having, they're not being touched yet, and they can see where the play is going. So he basically, Landry was right. He just basically created a different, I guess you would have called him a down linebacker if you wanted to. Yeah. But that flex, and we'll talk about that in the next show, for 10 years, that flex fooled everybody. And then in the early 80s, teams started figuring out. And that's where the famous Washington counter tray came from. That counter tray was a counter trap where you got that guy in the flex into the gap, and then you brought the guard or the tackle down on top of him, and that opened up that little gap, the counter tray. But for 77, that absolutely fooled everybody. And then you have Harvey Martin, who should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And even at too tall. Again, one of the negatives about how the Steelers-Cowboys rivalry went was for some reason in the 80s, it became, you won Super Bowls, you should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm not saying that the Steelers don't have players worthy of the Hall of Fame. They do, but Dallas didn't get some players in the Hall of Fame because the idea, I mean, we finally got, Cliff Harris in the Hall of Fame. We finally got Drew Pearson in the Hall of Fame in the last couple of years.
Howley.
Chuck Howley in the Hall of Fame this year. Those literally were held back because people were like, well, yeah, they were good, but they lost 2 Super Bowls to the Steelers. And Ed Too Tall Jones and Harvey Martin. Harvey Martin in 77, if you counted sacks, would have had 23 sacks.
Which they went back and started counting.
But they still won't give him the record,
right,
which is weird to me. If you're going to count him on his stats, well, then now that should be the record.
Yeah.
I don't, that's just one of those weird things.
So in the next podcast, when we talk about the 78 to 85 Cowboys, in 1982, a lot was going on. 1 was a strike.
Yeah.
And 2 was the sack became an official NFL stat.
Yeah, which was something that had not been heard of. And so again, if you're going to put on, if you're going to say, if the Hall of Fame and the NFL record's going to say, yes, he got 23 sacks, well, then he should have the record now. That makes that's weird to me.
Yeah.
But I get it. You do the whole on the field ceremony and stuff. But anyway, so the 1977, let's go ahead and go before we do that. One of the things, they didn't play in a Thanksgiving game. People forget about that. The fact that St. Louis for 2 years was the home team in the Thanksgiving game, and the ratings were so bad that the NFL was like, let's put it back to Dallas. And we'll talk about that because this film, the 77 film, which was technically the 78 year because they always made the films in the spring,
right? This
is what led to what will be called America's Team. And I have a hot sports opinion about that in the next show, so check that out. But yeah, the Thanksgiving game proved that St. Louis had them and St. Louis was good. This was the Coryell St. Louis years with Jim Hart at quarterback, and they were a thorn in the Cowboys' side in the 70s. But they just didn't draw, so the NFL was like, we'll give it back to the Cowboys in 76 or 78. But here's your starting lineup. Now, for me growing up, this is like the greatest starting lineup ever. Quarterback Roger Staubach, running back Tony Dorsett, and he wasn't a starter at the beginning of the year. Robert Newhouse, fullback. Wide receiver, Drew Pearson. Wide receiver, Golden Richards. Tight end, Billy Joe Dupree. Of course, you had Butch Johnson, though, who basically got as many snaps.
Yeah.
And then an offensive line that, to be honest with you, really should have a couple in the Hall of Fame. Ralph Neely, Herbert Scott, John Fitzgerald, Tom Rafferty at guard, who would eventually come over and be center for the 80s teams and make multiple Pro Bowls, and then right tackle Pat Donovan. But here's the defense. I mean, this is if you're looking, if you know the league, this is roster baiting at its best right here.
And remember, I told you how great I thought the 71 defense was.
Yeah, we even talked about how
Adderley and all that. Yeah.
Well, the front four for both of those. For this one, Too Tall Jones, Ed Jones, Jethro Pugh playing out his last legs, but still really good. Randy White and Harvey Martin.
Fantastic.
And then you've got linebackers. Thomas Anderson, Bob Brewing, and D.D. Lewis. And D.D. Lewis is another one that probably should be in the Hall of Fame. All the linebackers, I mean, think about it. Tom Landry created a 4-3 with the Giants so that he had a stud linebacker in Sam Huff, and he wanted to make sure that Sam Huff could flow to the ball. So obviously Dallas had amazing linebackers. The problem is it's held against them that Tom Landry had created the 4-3 because they're not given their due as great linebackers. Oh, it's the system. It's the system. Yeah, but I mean, Hollywood Henderson was pretty special.
Yeah, he just couldn't. I mean, he was his own worst enemy.
Henderson was Lawrence Taylor, but couldn't handle the drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, you listen to anybody from the 70s, Hollywood Henderson was the first Lawrence Taylor. He could not stay on the field. He returned kicks. A linebacker returned kicks. If you'd have put Hollywood Henderson in the Dolphins 3-4, he'd have had 20 sacks, 25 sacks in the 70s multiple times. If you could have just put Hollywood Henderson hand on the ground as a 3-4 linebacker to go after the quarterback, it'd have been crazy because he was as fast as Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, another part of this defense is the other linebacker, Bob Brunig.
Bob Bruin, yep.
Yeah, Bob Bruning. He replaced Leroy Jordan, who retired after the
another
76.
guy who should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, there's so many Cowboys that should be in the Hall of Fame. Anyway, go ahead and continue with the rest of the defense.
D.D. Lewis, and then the cornerbacks. People forget about the cornerbacks, but Benny Barnes and Aaron Kyle. Now, they were propped up. You had maybe the best two safeties in the league at that time in Charlie Waters, Cliff Harris. Cliff Harris just made the Hall of Fame a couple years ago. Charlie Waters will probably never get in, and I'm fine with that. He's on the border. If he got in, I'd be happy for him. But
if Darren Woodson's not going to get in, then I don't think Charlie Waters.
Well, I think Darren Woodson gets in. I think Darren Woodson gets in just like Harris and Howley. He kind of gets forget. Speaking of, if we want to talk about all those great 90s offensive line, why is Larry Allen the only one that's ever got into the Hall of Fame?
The Great Wall of Dallas, as we always called them back when we were growing up.
Sure.
So I was going to say, I still think the 71 defense is better just because of the cornerbacks.
I agree.
Now, Aaron Kyle and Benny Barnes, this is probably their best stretch, 77 to 79, but I feel that Herb Adderley and Mel Renfro are going to be much better.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Kyle, they were good. Kyle and Barnes were very good, but you had a pass rush that led the league in sacks. And not only sacks, but just, we were talking about it, they just lived in the backfield. Yeah. Like, that's the whole highlights of the 77 Cowboys.
And when we get to like the 92 Cowboys, we're going to talk about a player that kind of put them over the edge, that was living in the backfield. Didn't get the sacks necessarily, but was just having a date with the quarterback
every time. Yeah. All right. And so, of course, the big move for Dallas, they knew they needed a home run type back. That literally was the only thing missing from that offense.
Yeah. With the great draft and the great trades, they addressed every other piece except for
running back,
a breakaway running back.
Yeah, you had Preston Pearson, and we talked about Calvin Hill had moved over to the league. Walt Garrison retired. Dan Reeves had already retired 3 years before. In fact, Dan Reeves was the coach on this team. So they make a trade with Seattle. I tried to look up. I don't know what they really gave up. I mean, it wasn't a lot. Maybe just a couple of seconds or something. You got to remember, this isn't a time when the Cowboys dominated drafting. And the reason they did is they used computers and they went after players that necessarily didn't play football in college.
Yeah. And in the next podcast, we're going to talk about the scouting combine.
Yes.
And how Dallas kind of
created that. Yeah. Every other teams were like, wait, they're already doing that, so why don't we do that for the league?
Exactly.
So they make a trade and they get Heisman Trophy winner Tony Dorsett, funny enough, from the College of Pittsburgh. And as we talked about it took him a few games to really get into starting, but even early on, you knew that was it. You watch any highlight film and like he would get 5 carries and have a touchdown and 70 yards. But he wasn't doing the little things. And then also, this is where we talked a little bit about before. Landry didn't handle improvisation in his offense well. And Tony Dorsett was a run to daylight. There's 2 different things. Like, the reason I always say that, we can talk about the offensive line for the 90s, but what made that running game work well is Emmitt Smith wasn't a run to daylight. Emmitt Smith ran where you told him to run, and if it was 4 yards, he got 4 yards. If it was 20 yards, he got 20.
And he never got lit up.
He never had multiple, like you didn't have a game where he had 10 carries for 15 yards. Tony Dorsett was the exact opposite. Tony Dorsett would change field direction. Blocking was to left, but the play collapsed. He would cut right. There's a famous, I tried to find it to put in here, but I couldn't find it enough to cut it. But there's a play where against the Cardinals where he cuts into the gap. It's closing up, and he literally just rotates out and goes all the way across the field. Landry didn't handle that well, and I think that's why Landry didn't let him start early enough. And we go back to, that was the knock on Tom Landry, a little bit too robotic at times, a little bit too like, we do it my way, and that's the only way. But after that St. Louis game, Landry got into the film room. This is a famous story where he basically said, all right, you know what? Dorsett runs different. So offensive line, just block your guy. Keep your head on their hat. And he kind of created zone blocking without doing it, if you think about it, because that's literally what it was. Instead of we're running this, you go this gap, it's hand the ball off to Dorsett, you pick the hole. That's literally zone blocking. That's what Mike Shanahan did with the Broncos, and why you had Olandis Gary running for 1,000. Mike Anderson, the Marine, running for 1,000 yards. Yeah. And it's not that they were bad running backs, but it was the offensive line basically blocked everybody, and you chose where you went. And so, again, one of the times that you got to give Landry credit, he basically kind of not scrapped his offense, but said, we're going to do things different. But at the end of the day, dude, it's the defense. That this whole season is about the defense. This defense
for both teams in the Super Bowl.
For both teams in the Super Bowl, but Dallas, man. This is what their points were. And again, this is back in the old schools. They're 2 games they lost. Let's go ahead. They go 8-0. They beat the Giants 24-10. I think that was on Monday night, if I remember. No, it wasn't. It was on 1 o'clock. Oh, no, I'm sorry. St. Louis was on Monday night. So they go into that St. Louis game at home, and they lose to St. Louis 24-17. That was one of those games. I was watching the highlights. St. Louis just answered everything Dallas did. They just answered back. Answered back. Give them credit. And then the next week, they lose to Pittsburgh 28-13. Again, it's Pittsburgh. As much as we talk about early 70s, Dallas was a great matchup against Miami. Pittsburgh was just a bad matchup for Dallas. Yeah. They were almost there, but Pittsburgh just did a couple things different that Dallas just could never answer. But then they answered back again, and they finish on a 4-game winning streak. But here's the points scored against them: 10, 21, 7, 24, 16, 10, 0, 10, 24, 28, 7, 14. The odd shootout against San Francisco to end the year, 35-6, and then in the playoffs, 7-6-10. Now, we as Cowboy fans, you and I, we also like to be honest. Let's honestly admit that was probably the greatest possible playoff teams Dallas could play back to back to back and beat. Because Minnesota was having an offensive crisis that year, but their defense was really, really good. Chicago was Walter Payton and nobody else.
The NFC title game, it was against the Vikings.
Yes.
It was kind of a blowout in the sense that the 71 NFC title game was against the 49ers. But in this case, Tarkenton was not playing in this game. He was hurt. He was out.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it was already an L for the Vikings.
Yeah, Bob Lee, the great Bob Lee.
The great Bob Lee. I mean, okay, so the NFC title game was more known for the fire incident.
Yeah, the fire in the stands. Yeah. Exactly. Good. Wow. You've done your research. I'm impressed. Okay. Dude almost died in the stands, and the game just, hey, look, there's a guy on fire. That if you watch the highlights from that, they actually show the camera over there, and then they don't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that now. Everything would be shut down.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not saying that they're wrong now. That's what it should be. This guy literally, he survived, but he could have died very easily. But yeah, I mean, that's why I say sometimes to win a Super Bowl, even great teams, you need a benefit of a run. And Chicago was not great. They had Walter Payton and a young defense.
They overexceeded. And it was in a weak NFC Central division.
Yeah, a very weak. They were 9-6 and won the division.
They were getting old. The only competition was the Vikings. The Packers' prime was already long gone. And the Lions were the Lions. So the Lions wouldn't get good until the early 80s. So it was a situation where it was prime for the Pickens, and they needed to have a 4th team, and it was just happened to be the Bears. But all they had was Walton Payton. It wasn't going to be until like 82, 83 when they actually were a competitive team.
Yeah, and then the Rams, the other team in the playoffs, they again, that's the year they brought in Joe Namath, and he started 4 games and was absolutely terrible. And Pat Hayden stepped in, and Pat Hayden went 8-2. He threw 11 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Vince Ferragamo was hurt. He played 3 games but didn't start. So again, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you sometimes have to admit that I don't know if Dallas gets through it. If everybody, I think they do, because I really do think this was we'll talk about this when we end this series of looking back at Super Bowl teams. I do think this is one of the best teams in NFL history. Yeah. I think when they did the America's game, when people forget, when they first did America's game, they were basically rating all the Super Bowl winners, who was the best. And I think this one got like 5th. In fact, it got over 92, and I do take exception to that, because I think the 92 team, we'll talk about that later, but I think the 92 team, 93, I think the 90s team were way more dominant.
And I think they're similar in the sense that they're both young.
Yes, exactly.
The 71 team was very experienced, but the 77 team was pretty young with all those great draft picks.
Good point.
So, and 92, honestly, if there was no salary cap, think about 94. All those guys are still there.
That's and this is something we'll talk about, but hey, this is what we do. Jerry Jones and Carmen Policy and DeBartolo for the Niners, they're the ones that push for the salary cap. And the reason is they didn't want to pay these guys, but they didn't want to be labeled as cheap or didn't want to pay. So they literally created a manufactured debt ceiling.
Yeah.
Just to go ahead and say it, where I can't pay for Ken Norton Jr. We'd love to. Oh, Alvin Harper. Oh, man, we'd really love Alvin Harper.
Well, they wanted fair competition. They wanted
they didn't want to pay.
But I'm saying
I know. That's what they were saying.
So like the Carolinas of the world, the Jacksonvilles of the world, the more low budget franchises could actually compete. Because honestly, if this was soccer style where you could just pay however much you want, Jerry Jones trying to avoid this, like you were saying, you could.
Oh, he would have paid.
I mean, and now you're seeing it with the quarterback salaries.
Yeah.
They're through the roof. Just a mid-level quarterback's going to get 25, 30 million a year.
Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott. I mean, I love Dak, Daniel Jones.
4 years, 160. Crazy.
Think about that, man. We're going to get to a point, and this is why I love this show. We're talking to 77 Cowboys. But we're going to get to a point where you're going to get more Jalen Hurts type, where Jalen Hurts technically took a little less money. It sounds big, but if you actually look at the years per, that's what's going to happen. And because at some point, players are going to be like, yeah, 200 million is great, but I can make 150 million and still win, Super Bowl. Anyway, let's go back to the 77 team.
Yes, sir.
All right. So 77, as we talked about, they start 8-0. Their closest game in that 8-0 stretch was the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm telling y'all, St. Louis is everybody thinks that the blue jersey curse started with the Baltimore Colts Super Bowl in 70. The blue curse jersey started because St. Louis always made Dallas wear the blue jerseys in St. Louis. And St. Louis, man, I'm telling you, they were a team like this year in 77, they were 7-7. And they were always right there. They were 10-4 in 76. They were 11-3 in 75.
Yeah, they won the division in back-to-back
yes,
years.
I mean, but their problem was they could never get past that playoff. That's where that always got them. And the Rams beat them in 75. And so, but they were always a thorn in the Cowboys' side. So that was the closest game at that point until they lost to St. Louis and then Pittsburgh. And then after that, man, you could just kind of tell that Dallas kind of said, all right, well, we're righting the ship now. Let's go.
Yeah, they after that Steeler loss, that defense shut down everybody except for one game. Like you said, that odd shootout against the 49ers in Candlestick.
And that wasn't even a good 49er team. They were 5-9 that year. And they didn't even score a lot of points. In fact, they scored 35 in that game. They only scored 220 for the total season. To give you comparisons, Dallas scored 345 that year.
Yeah, I think 49ers quarterback was Jim Plunkett at this point.
But, that always happens. You look at good defenses, 85 Bears, Miami Dolphins on Monday night.
Their one loss. Yeah, they got blown out by the Dolphins.
Everybody forgets that Baltimore team, I can't remember who it was. There was a 38-35 game early in the year when Tony Banks actually led them to a victory. Yeah, that's right, Tony Banks.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who it was against. So every great defense seems to have one or two games in a year where things just don't match up well, or give the credit to the other team. They just come up with a great game plan.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you look at the 85 Bears, not even that one loss early in the season, they were winning, but they were winning because of their offense, not necessarily because of their defense.
Yeah.
And going back to the 2000 Ravens, it was week 2, a home game against the Jaguars. They won 39-36.
All right, so the season ends like this: Dallas 12-2, they make the playoffs. Washington 9-5 sit at home because Chicago wins the tiebreakers.
And this was the last year of the 14-game schedule.
Yep.
And the way it worked was the division winners in each conference. There was 3 divisions in each conference. They would get into the playoffs. And then the best non-division winning team, so the best record for someone that didn't win a division was
one wild card.
Yeah. But also, even if you had the number 1 seed, you couldn't play anyone in your division in the divisional round.
Yeah, they did the baseball rule where you couldn't play your own division in the first round. You could in the second round going forward.
Yeah, so
that was weird.
Yeah, so but in this season doesn't really matter because Dallas had the number 1 seed, and the wild card team, I believe, was the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, they were 9-5. Them and the Vikings finished with the same record, but Minnesota won on tiebreakers. Then the Rams won the West. Over in the AFC, you want to talk about again, not knocking Dallas. I mean, look at all we're obviously Dallas people, but
Right.
we were talking about this off the air. Part of the reason of the success of the Dallas run in the 70s, the NFC was, and you could even make the case in the 90s, the NFC was just 2 or 3 teams. The AFC is where everything was at. Baltimore wins the AFC East 10-4. Miami sits at home with a 10-4 record.
Yeah.
Think about that. Pittsburgh wins the AFC Central 9-5, but Cincinnati's 8-6, Houston's 8-6, and even Cleveland is 6-8.
Houston beat Cincinnati to close out the season.
Yes.
I think that kind of ended there.
I think Cincinnati makes the playoffs if they win that game.
I think so too. Yeah.
Ken Anderson, that was when I think the Oilers. In fact, I think it was at home in Cincinnati. Oilers had like 8 sacks, and Anderson threw like 3 interceptions.
Oh wow!
But even Cleveland is 6-8 that year. And then in the AFC West, Denver 12-2. The Raiders 11-3 and are a wild card team. San Diego 7-7. And then you had the Seahawks 5-9 and the Chiefs.
Okay, so 77 was the last year of Don Coryell as a Cardinal coach.
And then the next year,
I think toward the end of the year, he becomes the Chargers coach, and then you see like a 4 or 5 year run where the Chargers look like the best team in that conference.
4 or 5, dude. You're talking almost 7 years.
Well,
you go back to that 86, 87 when Fouts got hurt, and they were still. That's the year they finished like 6-2, and then ended up collapsing.
The 87 strike year, they were 8-1, and then they lost their last 6 games. I guess when I think about those Chargers, I think about late 70s, early 80s, where they had either the best record or second best record in the conference. And they would make the playoffs. You know, in 80, they made it to 80 and 81. They made it to the AFC title game.
Yes,
and they
Cincinnati
lost.
Game.
Yeah, so it was 80. They played at home against the Raiders. They lost, and the 81, the freezer. I don't know what the description of that game was, but it was one of the coldest games of all time.
You know, I think at the time it was just literally called Ice Bowl 2, and it was such a bad setup for the Chargers, who threw the ball and didn't really. I mean, they ran when they needed to, but they weren't a run first team.
Yeah.
The Chargers, the weakness of those Chargers. Why are we talking about this now? We're going to be talking this in 77, 78, 85.
It's really your fault.
Yeah, I know. But the weakness for the Chargers was their defense. That was always their weakness, and they wanted to outscore you. But anyway, so we go into the playoffs. In the first round, you've got the Broncos pulling off. It's funny because the Broncos are 12-2.
Yeah.
There's this idea built around this Bronco team like they were Cinderella, because they were at some point, but they were the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
They, Pittsburgh and the Raiders and all that, but they were the number 1 seed. This wasn't a bad team by any stretch.
Pittsburgh had already proven themselves. They already won 2 Super Bowls by this point. And then the prior season, they went into the AFC title game without both of their starting running backs against the Raiders in Oakland.
Yes.
So you already knew that Pittsburgh already had the confidence, and they should have won this game. But it was tied at 21 in the fourth quarter, and then the Broncos just pulled it away.
Yeah, they scored 13 points in that fourth quarter. And it was 2 field goals and a 34-yard pass from Craig Morton. We, of course, remember that name. That's right. Former quarterback for the Cowboys in the first Super Bowl. Yeah. Had been jettisoned off to the Giants. And much like Fran Tarkenton, who went to the Giants and struggled, eventually found his way to the Broncos. And he wasn't great. Let's be honest. We talked about this, you and I, off the air.
He didn't need to be.
He didn't need to be, but I mean, he did when it needed to be.
Yes.
I mean, in the Super Bowl,
kind of like 06 Ravens with Steve McNair. Rest in peace.
Oh, I keep forgetting that.
I mean, they were 13-3 at the 2 seed. They won a lot of close games just because of him. He was kind of their difference maker.
Yes.
That's kind of how I equate it to the 77 Broncos. Craig Morton got them out of situations they typically were not going to win in prior years. They probably would have still finished 8-6, 95, but because of his leadership, his experience, they were able to push it to 12-2, and they had a great defense. Randy Granishar, Tom Jackson. I mean, it was a loaded defense, and they could run the ball. They got about 1,800 yards during the season. They had a 3 running back platoon. They had a lot of different players that were very crucial to their success. As a fan of teams that have great depth, this was one of those teams that they were so good at just throwing someone out. Kind of like with the San Francisco 49ers of today's age. They can just throw someone out there, they'll get you 500 yards.
That's a good comparison. You look at their leading wide receiver, Haven Moses.
Yeah, great player.
539 yards, 4 touchdowns. Jack Doblin, 443 yards. Riley Odom, 429 yards. Rick Upchurch, 240.
Upchurch, great return guy.
Yes, but just not there wasn't a guy that Dallas was like, okay, we've got to stop this guy.
And watch the Super Bowl, rewatch it on YouTube. Upchurch's jersey color looks different than everybody else's jersey color.
Yeah, I was telling you, I miss the days when you just have weird jersey unevenness. Like it's a little bit more red.
I always want the backstory of how that happened.
Yeah, that's what UniWatch. He used to be on ESPN, but he now has his own blog. He tells those kind of stories. But yeah, that's probably just one of those that just died different. They're just like, take it. But in comparison, you had Drew Pearson in 14 games, 870 yards. But this is the weird thing. He only had 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. Tony Hill was on this team, but he was a rookie.
Yeah, he didn't. He only had 2 catches, 21 yards. Yeah. But think about that. There was but there was 18 touchdowns. And it's funny because what we knocked the Broncos for, you almost give the Cowboys credit for, they spread the ball out. Yeah. Pearson, 2 touchdowns. Preston Pearson's 4 touchdowns. Billy Joe Dupree, this is receiving, 3 touchdowns. Tony Dorsett, 1 touchdown. Golden Richardson, 3 touchdowns. Jay Salati, again, a tight end, a backup tight end who on any other team would have started. He was a clutch guy. Robert Newhouse, 1 touchdown. Where Dallas did it, though, was the rush. Tony Dorsett, 1,000 yards. Robert Newhouse, 700 yards. Preston Pearson, 341 yards. Roger Staubach, 171 yards. Yeah. Doug Dennison, who ended up as a Giant, I think. Doug Dennison with a touchdown. But as you talked about in the open, they ran for 2,300 yards and 21 touchdowns. Yeah. They threw for 2,600 yards and 18 touchdowns.
And you combine that together, it's almost 5,000 yards of total offense. But it's almost 40 touchdowns for the defense, or for the combined rushing and receiving touchdowns. It was a very well balanced team. They didn't, when we go into the next podcast, when we're talking about the 78 to 85 Cowboys, you realize, oh wait, they can still throw the ball.
Oh yeah,
especially with the emergence of Tony Hill, and then later in the 80s with Doug Cosby, they're getting 3,500 yards per season. It's not like they couldn't throw that much here. And again, 79 Cowboys with Roger Staubach. That was Staubach's best year.
Yes,
his last year was his best year, and they were throwing a lot more by that point.
Well, I still think you were in an era at this time where even an innovative coach like Tom Landry, it was get up and just get home.
Yeah.
Like just, if you're up 16-3, 90s Cowboys. If you're up 16-3, shut her down, just run the ball, let's go home.
Parcells would do that in the 80s.
Parcells would do that in the 80s. I mean, again, that used to be the modern, that was football. You get up quick, and then we all think that everybody in the 70s and 80s and 90s ran the ball. You did, but you threw early.
Yeah.
Got your touchdowns, and then you just sat on you let your warhorse running back run the ball 25 times.
Next month, when we talk about the 90s Cowboys, that was their model. They would get up 14-3. Aikman would throw almost 200 yards in the first half.
And then end up with 240 yards for the whole game.
He would only throw – he would get 2 completions in the second half, but they were 3rd and 4th completions to Novacek. And they would just hand it off to Emmett the rest of the way.
Exactly. And also, this is a weird thing about this team. Usually when you talk great defenses, you stick out the Dallas, the doomsday, the 2 doomsday defenses, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the all steel curtain, the fearsome foursome, the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens, turnovers.
Yeah.
And while this team got turnovers, they only had 2 defensive touchdowns. Thomas Henderson had 1, an interception for 75 yards. And then Jay Salati so they only had 1 because that was actually a fumble. I remember seeing that play on the highlight. Okay. Tony Dorsett fumbled and Salati fell in. So for a team that was big on sacks, they got a lot of turnovers, but it wasn't like the defense was opportunistic score-wise. I'm telling you, this was such a weird year researching because they're so dominant, but they're not like winning every game 28-3 or anything. Like a lot of these games were 1 possession games that Dallas was just making enough plays to win.
I wonder if coaching was an issue at this point.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, with this talent, like you and I both looked
Oh,
at
I
the
see what you're
starting
saying,
line.
yeah.
Yeah, they should have probably been winning by even bigger scores, but they're probably just like, oh, okay, we're at a point we're going to win this game. Let's
Yeah.
just go ahead and close it out. We don't need to run up the score. But if you look at it, Dallas Cowboys had 21 interceptions that season.
Yeah, I mean, they got turnovers,
Yeah,
and they got sacks. I mean, they had a huge amount of sacks.
Staubach and company only allowed 10. They got 53 sacks. If when they went back and started counting the sacks, they only gave up 33. So I mean, it's really situational. Like they're creating more sacks than they're giving up. They're turning the ball, or they're creating turnovers more than they're giving up the ball. So that's a recipe for at least a playoff team.
Oh, I guess we talked about it earlier. I thought that Harvey Martin was credited with 23 sacks. They only credit him with 20 sacks. So that's why maybe they did. That's why they maybe didn't give him. I don't know why I thought it was 23.
From 76 to 80, I mean, he was beasting. And really, he had except for his last year, every year, so from 73 to 82, he was just feasting on teams.
Yeah, well, I mean, in 82 is that weird year where they didn't, he ends up with 8 sacks.
That literally could have been his best year. I mean,
yeah, if the whole season would have played out.
9 games, 8 sacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that too. That's another thing in that 78 to 85. Ed Tutal Jones just kept getting better the older he got. His best year was 85.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about it, but after 79, he didn't play football.
Yeah, he quit that was actually 78 to 80. He 78 79. He was not on that second team that lost to the Steelers.
I thought he was on that team.
I think because they talk about when they came back that next year to defend the Super Bowl, he's not on the team because he becomes a boxer. But we'll talk about that. All right, so let's go to the playoffs now. I meant to go there earlier and we kind of got off tangent. That's what happens.
You keep doing that.
That's what we do on these shows. That's what we call it outdrink the coverage. All right, so in the playoffs, and if you don't know, each one of these shows, that's what we put on the screen. That's the helmets. That's the playoffs. Dallas played Chicago. Minnesota played the Rams in the first round. Denver played the Steelers. The Raiders played the Colts in the first round. The Cowboys, the Vikings win. Of course, the Broncos and the Raiders win. So you set up this AFC West matchup, and I think everybody thought, and I'm saying it like I was there. I was 2 years old. But I think just reading back, everybody thought, okay, this has been a great season for Oakland. But the Raiders finished one game behind them. They're the Raiders. But the Raiders kind of have the Cowboys thing of, as great as they were, they tended to not play well sometimes in the biggest game. And this was one of those games as they just couldn't do anything right against Denver. Now, it wasn't Mile High. And you have we were talking about this at the beginning of this. How fun that had to have been. Your team not only comes out of nowhere after 20 years, makes the first playoffs in the new NFL, and then not only makes the playoffs with the number 1 seed, and they make it to the Super Bowl. So you kind of just wonder at that point, maybe they just were, playing under that magical, they couldn't lose until they got to Dallas. But honestly, this should have been a Raiders-Cowboys Super Bowl.
This was probably the closest to that actually happening. And it's very sad. Going back, though, the divisional rounds kind of had 2 great nicknames for games. The Raiders and Colts played the Ghost to the Post game. A great game that kind of ended the Baltimore run.
They were another team that was always right on that fringe. Burt Jones and that group just couldn't quite get through the Raiders and the Steelers.
There's a couple of errors in the 70s for the Colts. There was the early 70s with the dying old breed from the 50s and 60s, and then they had a couple lull years, and then Burt Jones came in there in 75, 77. They had some really good teams, just couldn't do it in the playoffs. But after this game, I don't think they made the playoffs until they left to Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I
don't know why I thought they sneaked in one more year, but I guess you're right.
I think this is their last great year before they left.
That's right.
Baltimore after the 83 season.
78, they were 5-11. Ted Marchibroda was still there. 5-11 in 79. He was fired. Then Mike McCormick. Oh God, they were bad. Oh my God, I did not realize in the shortened.
Right. Yeah, they
8-1. Yeah. Then there were 7-9 in 83, and then 4-12. Sorry, we're now on the Colts history. Dude, this team was 96, 87.
But that was when they got Eric Dickerson.
They were 9-6.
Yeah.
That was the
next time. So they did make the playoffs before they changed.
Ron Meyer as head
yes,
coach?
Ron Meyer, the SMU coach, who looked the other way. But so they did make 87 when they moved. That they made the playoffs, and that, like I said, that's when they made the trade for Eric Dickerson.
And on the NFC side in '77, we had Minnesota and the Rams in the Mud Bowl.
Yep,
I mean
that's a fun one to watch.
Yeah, so this was in the game in LA, and there was a bunch of torrential storms that were coming in. It was a 14-7 final for the Vikings.
Yep.
And it was a Vikings team that was on their last legs. They had made the Super Bowl the prior year, got shellacked by the Raiders. Old man Willie running interception.
Willie Lanier.
No, it was
Willie Horton. Was it Willie? I thought it was Willie Lanier.
Lanier was
Willie Wood was
Davis.
Was it Willie Davis?
Maybe.
Okay, now I gotta do real time.
I think we both outdrank the coverage. But yeah,
this is our first show, dude.
Oh man.
No, Willie Davis was a defensive end. That would have been even better.
I think he was whoever the cornerback was that had the pick six in that 76 Super Bowl. Anyway, yeah.
Willie Brown.
75
yards. Sorry.
See, I told you it was Willie Brown.
Sometimes we just go. Oh, speaking of, guess who befriended me on Facebook? No lie.
John Allen?
No, Jack Squirk.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be talking about him in the next show.
Yeah, in the 83 Super Bowl.
Yeah, he intercepts the screen pass.
Yeah, Raiders and Redskins. Yeah.
Yep. He anyway, I forgot to move this back over.
So when I think of that Super Bowl, I think of America's Game on NFL Network.
Todd Christensen.
Yeah, Christensen like starting to tear up, running with the Knights.
Oh man, he's dead too.
Yeah, R.I.P. He was a great personality.
Former Cowboy.
For
a minute.
A part of what we'll talk about in the next podcast about the bad. Well, that one's a good draft pick.
Yeah,
but what we did with him.
Well, was
the problem.
I know we joke about it, but you put his numbers up with Doug Cosby at the time. Raiders ran a different system. I get why Dallas didn't keep that. That's what. So again, burying the lead here. But that's a lot of the story of what Dallas did going forward is they had too good of players and good players got cut and moved on to other teams and were good players and it hurt Dallas. But anyway, all right. So Dallas in the playoffs again, they get, I think, the best break. They start off the playoffs by playing the Chicago Bears, who basically had Walter Payton and no one else. And they dominated 37-7. Chicago doesn't score till like in the fourth quarter. They held Chicago to 132 yards passing on the game. Hang on, let me pull that up. Let me make sure I got that right.
Cowboys
81 yards passing.
Oh wow!
And I'm sorry, 170. Okay, I'm sorry, it's 177 yard passing, but 4 interceptions. Bob Avellini. Mainly though, they held Walter Payton to 19 carries for 60 yards, no touchdowns. Roger Staubach only threw 13 times, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 2 sacks. But you had Tony Dorsett with 85 yards, Robert Newhouse with 80 yards, and Doug Dennison. I never realized, honestly, as much as I know, Doug Dennison, one of those, he retired after 78. He was just like, okay, I'm good.
Got my ring.
Yeah, I got my ring. I'm fine. I'm just going to quit. But he had 500 yards for Dallas in 76. He only had 60 in 77. So think about that. In the regular season, he only had 60 yards. In that playoff game, he had 40 yards and a touchdown. Wow. But again, it was that defense. The Dallas defense on the day, they had 3 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries, 4 interceptions. And for all the talk about what Landry did offensively, he was always at home as the defensive guy. And let's not forget, people, if you don't know, if you're young, Tom Landry was the offensive and defensive coordinator. Ernie Stautner was technically the defensive coordinator, the Hall of Famer from Pittsburgh, but Landry called all the plays. Stautner got everything ready. And as great as this offense and as all the trick plays, at the end of the day, Landry and that doomsday defense, man, at this time, there was no better defense. I mean, them and the Steel Curtain were the 2 best. And I still contend that those are still 2 of the top defenses of all time.
Yeah, I don't even think it's because of the talent with the other teams in the league. They were just great teams, great players that played as a team. And this game kind of epitomized it. I mean, it was a combination of Chicago only have one star at this point in Walter Payton. Charlie Waters had 3 of the 7 turnovers that the Cowboys had in this game. it was. There's really not much else to say other than the fact that this was the Bears' first playoff game in 14 seasons. They the last playoff game the Bears had during this time was the '63 title game, and this was a couple years before the Super Bowl was even a creation.
Think about that. You've got Dick Butkus and you got Gale Sayers, two iconic. And I know Gale Sayers didn't play long enough because of his injuries, but for all the talk about George Halas, sure seems like he left a lot of talent that they could have done better. And it's weird that everybody talks about Papa Bear and what he did, but a lot of that was very early in his career. And then they didn't really, they were a laughing stock in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
They were even a laughing stock up into the early 80s. They were good enough to, starting from now, they're good enough to be around the playoffs. And then Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan and all that.
But even then, there was a combination of the Packers and Vikings sucking. After
the Vikings went into a big, them and the Packers both, until Lynn Dickey became a player for Packers, and even then he never quite could get them over the hump.
This was the
NFC North was crappy, then it was the Central.
NFC North, Central was much different after the Vikings made the Super Bowl after '76.
Yeah, and the Lions were terrible always.
And then but because of how bad this division was, the Lions actually I think won the division in '82 or '83. I think it was '83.
Yeah, I think so.
They almost beat the 49ers in the playoffs in that season too. It was just a weird season weird stretch for that division where it was just no real competition, but someone has to come out of that division.
Yeah, they went 9-7 that year. 9-7 won them the division, and they lose to San Francisco 24-23.
Yeah.
That was just a bad year. The North was bad, or the Central at the time was bad. You didn't even think. It's funny. You look back in the 90s with Green Bay, and then the Vikings in the late 80s, and Green Bay in the 90s, and the Lions. People think that the North, or now the North, what was then the Central, was way more competitive throughout the years, and it really wasn't.
Well, all the Vikings needed in those late 80s was Herschel Walker.
Eric Hiffel in 83 threw for 12 touchdowns, 18 interceptions for the first place Detroit Lions. All right, so this is what we do in this show. We're literally burying the lead of the next show. All right, so Dallas beat Chicago 37-7, and as we talked about, the Broncos, they beat Pittsburgh 34-21. That sets up the NFC title game and the AFC title game. Again, matchup-wise, great. Dallas versus Minnesota again.
Yeah.
This is the fourth out of 6 years. Yeah, fourth out of 6 years that they played.
But without thinking of it, it sounds great. But when you start going into the details, I'm like, this looks like a mismatch.
Well, yeah, and it was. But again, no, they had played, and don't forget, they also had played in the Hail Mary year.
Yeah.
Which is funny. You talk about it. Think about all the great memories we think about the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Goes to the post. Both of those were in divisional rounds, and neither one of those teams won the Super Bowl that year. But those are two of the top moments in the 70s that you think of.
The next year, the Holy Roller, Oakland, and the Chargers.
Yep, which changed the rules of football for a while.
I don't even think the Raiders made the playoffs.
I don't think so. Yeah, that was that odd. Every great team in that era, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Dallas, the Rams, they had 1 year where they had to kind of reload, but they had injuries, so they were able to reload quicker. But anyway, so the Broncos and the Raiders, as we talked about, that was, I think that was the hot game of the week. And I understand why. They were, division teams. They had played two great games. And for all the talking we say about it, and, did Denver, they kind of Cinderella and all. Their playoff run up until Dallas was pretty damn good. They took it to the Raiders.
Yeah.
They forced a lot of turnovers. They win 20-17. They score late. I'm trying to get to the Haven Moses, 12 yards. It was actually 20-10, and Dave Casper scored to make it 20-17. Oakland actually scored 2 times in the fourth quarter. I didn't realize this. I don't know why, but into the fourth quarter, it was 14-3, the Broncos. You had to be thinking as a Bronco, oh, here we go. Because that's what happened back then. The good teams always found the way. No matter what, they always found a way. Ken Stabler threw for 215 yards, but he had an interception. Was only sacked once. Mark Van Egan, a very forgotten running back for the Raiders, he had 71 yards. Again, for Broncos, Craig Morton, 10 of 20, but for 224 yards. So they were, again, this is a different era, folks. 10 of 20, 50% was still considered good because you're completing, what's that, 22 yards of completion.
Yeah.
Like you're throwing the ball down the field.
Plays.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why everybody always wants to say that like Aikman is overrated. Look at his stats. Realize where he threw the ball compared to Steve Young down the field. If you'd have gave Aikman the Steve Young, and if you'd have gave Steve Young Dallas's offense, he would have been fine. Yeah. But he was throwing 15 yards, 20 yards on an average. They weren't, it was either.
And these were precision routes.
And so that's what they did in the 70s too. So, but running wise, Lonnie Perrin never even heard of him. 11 carries, 42 yards. Rob Lytle, heard of him. 7 carries, 26 yards. So much like what they did all year, they won, but it wasn't pretty. Stat wise, it was, and even defensively, it wasn't like they got a sack, interception, and that's really it. But they did enough to win the game.
Yeah, they were kind of a better version defensively than the 08 Steelers. They just won every game ugly in that sense. These weren't pretty wins. They would get big plays, but they just were never pretty wins.
Yeah, well, and again, I think a lot of that was the NFL back then. You and I talked about that. Yeah. You didn't. 300-yard days were just unheard of.
Yeah.
A great running back was 80 yards. I mean, heck, Drew Pearson this year led the league again, 14 games, led the league in wide receiving with 870 yards.
Wow.
Even if you only played 14 games now, you're going to get 2, 3, maybe even 8 receivers with 1,000 yards.
Correct. Yeah.
But that again, you didn't play it that way. But anyway, so we go to the Super Bowl. It's in New Orleans, which, again, one of the things Dallas at that time always ended up playing in New Orleans. One of the Super Bowls, though, was not at the Superdome.
Yeah, it was a Tulane
Stadium. Tulane Stadium. That was the Dolphins. It was like 32 degrees that day. It's funny to see that. You look on that 71 and you see the breaths and how cold they were, but it was sunny, so it wasn't like the Ice Bowl by any stretch. Yeah. But this game was indoors. And once again, Noe, Dallas tried their best to give this game to Denver early in the game. For some reason, again, I think this is where the motivation and the emotion. I just think Landry was too robotic in big games. And you saw it in this offense because the score is 27-10, but you just watched it for the first time fully. And I think the thing I got from you most was like, Jesus Christ, Denver was actually really good defensively in this game. They sacked the Cowboys more than the Cowboys sacked Denver. For all the talk about Harvey Martin and Randy White with the MVPs, they deserved it. But Denver was in the Dallas backfield too. But the difference is you could tell after one drive, Denver's not scoring when it matters in this game. And that's really where it came down to. Craig Morton was terrible. I feel bad for him. 4 of 15. 4 interceptions, sacked twice. I was looking at some things I was trying to count, and I was watching, and I probably missed 2, but out of the 15 times he dropped back, he was hit 15 times. Out of the 10 times that Norris Weiss dropped back, he was hit 9 times. That's not even counting just the 4 sacks. Yeah. And that's where we talk about, everybody talks about sacks. Sacks aren't the thing. It's quarterback pressures. Yeah. And in this game, anytime the quarterback planted that back foot, as I like to say, there was a Cowboy in his face, and it just honestly, Dallas should have won this game 65-10.
If it wasn't for all those penalties and turnovers.
And again, Landry tried to get too cute at times. Now, it does work. You get the Robert Newhouse touchdown pass that basically sealed the deal.
Yeah.
But they tried – I was watching. They try to reverse with Drew Pearson right when they moved over in the Denver territory, and they lose like 10 yards. And that just absolutely killed the drive.
Well, this is where I want to bring back Butch Johnson.
Okay, Butch Johnson.
He had 3 fumbles in this damn
game. Yes,
he
did.
The first play for the Cowboys on offense, it's like a lateral, fumbles the ball, and the second time I think it was on a punt or a kickoff return, possibly.
Yep.
And he fumbles the ball, and then the last one it was his touchdown, which I'm not sure if that was incomplete or a fumble. It was, to me, it was not a catch.
Well, okay, so by the rules of that time, it was.
Yeah.
He technically had control.
Which I think Pat Summerall described it during the.
Yeah, he actually did a good job. But yeah, if you watch it, it might be playing up here on the highlights here soon as we were just playing the 77 highlights, and you'll see it while we're talking. By rule, that was a catch. In no way is it a catch in any other era but that era. Because he does technically have the ball across the goal line, and that's all you needed to have back then. But yeah, I mean, if you're a Denver player, like Tom Jackson, by the way, a rookie on this year, the great linebacker, should be in the Hall of Fame. But I've seen him talk about this, like, that was a great team, and Dallas goes 12-2, and they dominate. He goes, but we gave them the game, and I don't disagree at all. They gave Dallas the game. That they just they had no answer for Too Tall and Harvey Martin and Randy White. And then that secondary. And Charlie Waters had a great game in the secondary because he's able to tee off on these wide receivers because, they're just throwing the ball. As we're watching on the film right now, Mortensen literally just throws it like Brett Favre because he's in so much trouble. But again, Broncos were getting pressure on Dallas too. But this is the difference. And it's kind of funny that it comes down to this. The difference in Craig Mortensen and Roger Staubach. Craig Mortensen was a perfectly good quarterback if he had a clean pocket. Yeah. Roger Staubach shined when he didn't have a clean pocket. Yeah. And as much as I feel bad for Craig Mortensen, this game is why Landry made the right choice. This is what Roger Staubach gave to you. In fact, Tom Jackson had a sack in this game. Oh, here it is. Here's the Bush Johnson fumble on the film. You can't see the film, but he's about to fumble it. Actually, that was Tony Hill that fumbled it on the kickoff return.
No, I thought it was
Bush Tony
Johnson.
Hill. I'm watching it right here. It's Tony Hill. We'll blame Bush Johnson because we love Tony Hill.
Yeah.
Tony Hill's an underrated second wide receiver. Yeah. But anyway, so this game kind of proved why Roger Staubach was picked over Craig Mortensen.
I mean, the Broncos had 8 total completions for 61 total yards.
So more hits on the quarterback than completions by the quarterback.
I mean, it was a complete domination. It was okay. If you watch the game, I encourage everybody to go back and watch it. It's on YouTube. Under 2.5 hours.
No commercials. It's just the game.
Yeah. To me, when I was watching it, I didn't realize how close this game was.
Yeah, exactly. Because 27-10 sounds like it's a big, typical blowout.
Even with the turnovers. So toward the end of the game, it's 23 Dallas, but then Craig Morton gets benched for Norris Weiss. Norris Weiss leads them on a touchdown drive, which ends up with a Rob Little touchdown, I believe.
Yep.
Because of the 20-10, and then the last touchdown is the
Newhouse from Golden Richards catches it. Newhouse throws it.
But Dallas on offense, I think Dallas outgained the Broncos like 300 and something to 100 and something. I don't even think the Broncos got over 150 yards of total offense. But I remember
they got 181 total.
Oh, okay.
181 total.
It was so many. It was 8 turnovers total for the Broncos in this game.
Oh, actually, sorry. Didn't take away the 35 sack yards.
Which
156 total.
Net yards. Okay.
Yes.
So it was just an utter blowout. The longest completion the Broncos had, the longest play the Broncos had was 21 yards, and that was in the first drive.
It was literally the first play, if I'm not mistaken.
And possibly. I have to go back and watch, but you ever look in the history of football for the last 40, 50 years, most of the first drives are scripted.
Yes.
They already know what their first 15 plays are going to be.
But I didn't do that in this era. That was Bill Walsh that started that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the San Francisco.
I stand corrected. Last 40-something years. Not 50-something years.
He might have started that with Cincinnati, but I do know for sure he was the one that started that in the 80s. Because you know why? Because John Madden would not shut up about it whenever the Niners would play. That he would talk about that for the first drive.
So did he talk about that more than he would talk about Brett Favre?
Oh, yeah.
Because, I'm a little younger.
Yes.
So I grew up with John Madden talking about Turducken and Brett Favre.
And Nate Newton Sweat.
Yeah. And it would be a wide, like the camera would zoom in on Nate Newton's butt, and you see the butt sweat.
Oh, Johnson did fumble one too, but he recovered it. Okay. So they both sucked.
Yeah. He never turned the ball over. He never turned the ball over. He would just drop the ball on the field and pick it back up. Thank you, AstroTurf.
That's a good point. All right, so that is a look at the 77 Cowboys. I'm having so much fun doing these. Just to look back, you and I looking all the history, and this is a team, and we'll talk more about my love because this is still, even though I forgot to say, technically this is supposed to be the first time I ever said a cuss word on one of the fumbles. My parents have always said that, but this is still really before my time.
Yeah.
The next video where we're going to really talk about what it's in my wheelhouse, what we became known as America's team, all that fun stuff. But again, we want to thank Frisco Bar and Grill. We want to remind you can find us on Facebook. Just type in Outdrink the Coverage. Find us on Twitter at OutDrinkU. Email us odtcnfl@gmail.com. Hey, follow us on YouTube. Dude, we are so happy. Our last 2 videos that we did, absolutely making great numbers. Please spread the word. at L4 Media Company on YouTube. We're going to have this one, the 78 to 85. We're also going to do the league season 3 retrospective. And also, now this one will already be up, but if you look up or down, intern Noe and I are going to do an online show where we talk about the schedule for the 23 Cowboys and what we think about that. But go ahead.
No, yeah, I was agreeing with you.
All right, so hey, watch this one and then just turn this one off and look at the 78 to 85, and we're going to talk about where the Cowboys slowly kind of started declining. Sadly, until then, he's intern Noe. I am Terry Bennett. This is Outdrank the Coverage, brought to you by Frisco Bar and Grill.